Hi, Beck and Colleen. Okay, so I'm not going to do a full presentation because I know it's already over time, so I'm just going to talk you through it. Because it's not a PowerPoint, it would be too hard to make sense. So if I just go through each slide or frame, as they're called. Okay, so I've got my overview of what I want to present. So you can see the feedback, overview of the literature. So I thought it was important to talk about reflective thinking and self-regulated learning, then research design, and then looking at each of the three stages. So this is where I need to save time because I kind of repeat myself later when I talk about these two things. So I talk about the first area of concern, which is completing my thesis on time. This was submitted with a document, so I'm not going to talk too much to that, but I also thought a visual representation was good. The red, when I look at it, it looks like, I feel like I haven't started it, but when you look at the key below, it kind of indicates, well, it's nearly completed. Then the second area of concern was the methodology, so just going through each of the phases. Now, this table is different to what I submitted with the document. I'm pretty sure I submitted the one that describes the action research cycle, whereas this explains exactly what I did. So I don't want to go into too much detail. It's actually just there as evidence that of what I've done. So then you've got the second stage, and I know that frame has to be fixed, and then stage 3. So you would have noticed at the start I had identify the problem. So that's basically covered in the introductory chapter and I guess the literature review, and then reflect and report is covered in the discussion, the final chapter of the thesis. So I would highlight that as well. Then the third one, need for a clear theoretical framework. It was funny, when I practiced, I actually talked about this in detail, but then you see the next frame, we'll just move over, I actually talk about reflective thinking as well, and then actually I'll go slower so you can actually read. I talk about prospective reflection, just basically Reinholz's definition, and then his definition of retrospective reflection, and then I talk about reflection cycles. So basically how he thinks learning can't occur unless both prospective and retrospective reflection occur. Okay, so then I talk about self-regulated learning, and this is where I feel like I'm being repetitive and I've got to save time. So if you've got any feedback regarding, well, maybe I could just pinpoint those areas of concern and then say I'll be covering them instead of basically talking about them twice. And then I've got that diagram again. So I kind of want to avoid that, and that's what I was going to look at doing tomorrow because I know I'm already over time. Then the research design, so talking about the research aim, the questions and the context of the study. Okay, so just informing them that I have different aims for each of the stages, but this aim and these research questions are for the whole study, whereas each stage has their own stage aim and questions. So I talk about the action research model I used. So there's the one it was based on. That's my adaptation of it. And then the 3 stages. So this information they got in the document that I gave them. So whether it needs to be repeated here, I wouldn't talk to it. It's basically just, I mean, when I say that, I wouldn't read or state exactly everything on there, but just give an overview of what it is. I thought it was important, and I just realised I haven't put this on my overview slide at the start, that I include data collection and analysis, so what data I collected and how it was analysed. There's a lot there because there is a lot of data, so I'm a bit unsure about how to talk about that, whether to cover it all or just show bits of it to demonstrate how I analyse parts of it. I also talk about this diagram because this is basically how what I use to analyse a lot of my qualitative data, so my researcher reflections and the semi-structured interviews. So so using the student work and my classroom observations, they formed my researcher reflections, and those reflections are what I analyse, and I analyse them in terms of the teaching practices that promoted or inhibited reflective thinking and self-regulated learning. Okay, so when I practiced this earlier, I was by this stage getting close to 20 minutes. So I actually didn't get through stage 1 without going, I went over 20 minutes around here. So yeah, I need to cut back. So there's stage 1, just highlighting it, and again, research aim, and then the research questions. So I'd probably read them. And then the results and findings. So obviously I don't think I can put all the results. So Colleen, you've always said that it's good to show what maths you did. So I thought I would show one of the maths tasks. So this was from one of the tasks I analysed, or one of the student work. So I talk about, they had the choice of 4 tasks and they were put on coloured paper. And this is one of the tasks. And this is how I analysed what the students chose. So the students stated which question they did and which one they thought would have been better for their learning. So I can talk here about what the A, B and C mean. So A, achievable, B, beneficial and challenging, and how I talk to students about that. So basically in this Venn diagram, 21 students thought the red task was achievable, beneficial and challenging, and how I encouraged students to choose tasks that were all 3. Here we've got 19 students who actually chose the red task, and then they believed, and this is the number of students who believe they should have chosen a different task. So of those 19, 1 thought the yellow would have been better, 8 thought the blue would have been better, 4 pink and 6 believe they shouldn't have changed. And the tasks I don't actually have an example of. I don't know whether I can, I can put them in, but that's just going to take a little bit more time in the presentation. And then I know this has a spelling mistake, so that should be then. But number of participants who stated this task would be better. So from 4 people who chose the yellow task thought the red would be better, 7 from the blue and 5 from the pink. So the whole purpose of doing this task was to see, first of all, well, can the students choose a task that is right for them? So you can see here, of the 19, only 6 felt that they chose the right task. And then you can also see here that a few thought that they should have chosen the red task, or 16 felt that they should have chosen the red task. So thinking that the red was probably better for their learning. So I would use this data to say, well, how effectively can they reflect? So I guess from this, their prospective reflection, their ability to analyse a task or what is right for them wasn't that great, because you would probably have more who have chosen no change. So they thought that the red task was the best for their learning. So this being stage 1, what does that tell me as a teacher? Well, maybe they need more practice at thinking about, well, what does achievable, beneficial and challenging mean, and how can I analyse a task to decide what is best for me? Okay, and then these are the key findings from stage 1. So I can read them, but I could easily just give a quick overview of that. Okay, so at this stage I'm around 20 minutes. And so I've got stage 2, again, so there we go, implement improvements, research aim, and the research questions. So research questions are quite long. Yep. Okay, and then I talk about the results and findings. So I talk about my how I came to do my research or reflections. So you can see there on the left side, I looked at my observations and the student work. And I did this for all classes. So this just shows class A and B, but there were 6 altogether. And at the end of that, I wrote my reflections. And then I planned for the next lesson cycle. So here I've used my researcher reflections and to show just a bit of data, I guess. So talking about the prospective reflections, so initially this is what I gave students in the first 2 lesson cycles. Sorry, first 3 lesson cycles. So I chose the colour task because, and my friend chose the colour task because. So in this first task, this was my reflection. So basically students were taking a lot of time answering or responding to that first prompt, if we just go back, and not really discussing. And instead of discussing, they just exchanged books and copied down what their friend wrote. So instead of that discussing, there was a lot of writing going on. And that's what I wrote in my reflections. And then compared to lesson 4, so once I went through my reflections, I thought, well, let's change the prospective reflection. And I thought, well, I don't really want the students to write too much because that was taking up a lot of time. So we were just getting them to discuss how you would start the task, whether it's something you can complete, whether the task is too easy for you, or whether the task will challenge your thinking. So really focusing those prompts on the A, B and C, the achievable, beneficial and challenging. And there's just an excerpt from my reflections from the 4th lesson cycle. So I started to notice that these prompts were better. Students were discussing their ability to complete a task and the strategies required to complete the task. And these are my findings from stage 2. And then I didn't get any further because I thought, well, do I include stage 3 since they had a chapter on it? So there is space for stage 3. Or do I go and just respond to the studies research questions, so the main research questions, from the thesis, and then moving forward, so what my plans are from here. Yeah, so at this stage it's too long, it's a little bit repetitive, so I can save time there, but if there's any areas you think that I'm missing or can be done differently, please let me know because, yeah, I want to do well. Thank you. Bye.